Hi, folks. I'm Nathaniel Stinnett, the Executive Director of the Environmental Voter Project. And today we are doing a really fast mini briefing on what we are seeing. This is the second week of September, what we're seeing in Arizona and Nevada, both in all the elections that are going on, but also matters that might be of particular importance to those of us in the climate movement. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This is your mini briefing on Arizona and Nevada. So first off, Arizona. At the Environmental Voter Project, we have identified 229,000 registered voters who are highly likely to list climate or other environmental issues as their top priority, yet we think they're unlikely to vote this fall without a really sophisticated mobilization campaign to get them to the polls. Why do we think they're unlikely to vote? Because we've looked at their voter files and we can see that they did not vote in the 2020 general election, nor did they vote in any election since then. So these are the people we're targeting at the Environmental Voter Project, 229,000 registered Arizonans who are likely to list climate as their top priority, but are unlikely to show up without being mobilized to do so. How big is a number like 229,000 in a state like Arizona? Well, as you can see there, Arizona was only decided by 10,457 votes in 2020. This is a razor tight state. And our target population of these low propensity climate voters is like 21 times larger than the margin of victory was 4 years ago. As you can also see, there are an enormous number of crucially important and competitive elections going on in Arizona. Not only will it be a state that could decide who wins the White House, but it could also decide the US Senate. It also has two very competitive US House seats. It also has a super close state Senate, a super close state House legislature, the State House of Representatives, and there is an abortion ballot measure on there to try to codify Roe. Arizona is going to be crucially important, and any voter who votes in November of 2024 is likely to have 3, 4, maybe even 5 crucially important competitive things on their ballot. All right, what do our targets look like in Arizona? Well, if you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll see a registered voters row. What that is a demographic breakdown of who the registered voters are in Arizona. So for instance, 8.4% of registered voters in Arizona are 18 to 24. 44.6% are male. That's how you can read that. The row above that, LPEVs, what that stands for is low propensity environmental voters. These are these 229,000 low propensity voters who were mobilizing at the Environmental Voter Project. A few very quick things that immediately jump out. First, you'll see that this target population, these low propensity climate voters, are disproportionately young, right? So 80% of these low propensity climate voters are under the age of 35, 80%. Whereas if you look at the overall electorate in Arizona, fewer than 27% are under the age of 35. So that's the first thing that you can see about this target population of ours. The second one, look at those racial demographic breakdowns. Almost 70% of voters in Arizona are white, but fewer than 50% of our targets at the Environmental Voter Project are white in Arizona. And that's largely driven by our target population being disproportionately Native American and disproportionately Black. You can also see that Hispanics are overrepresented, but just by a little bit. And AAPI voters are overrepresented as well in our target population, but it's mostly being driven by the prevalence of Native American and Black voters in this group of low propensity environmentalists. Another really important thing about Arizona is many of these low propensity environmentalists have good canvassable density. That's kind of a campaign term of art. What it means is they're densely packed together and especially in Tucson, they are living in canvassable buildings. That means they're not living in high rises or they're not in a gated community. Door-to-door canvassers can reach these people. And that's important because even in this high-tech era of campaigning, one human being having a conversation with another human being at their door remains the single most effective way to turn a non-voter into a new voter. So what that means is at the Environmental Voter Project, we only have 4 canvassing hubs across the entire country. 2 of them are in Pennsylvania, so Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. 1 of them is in Austin, Texas, and the 4th is in Tucson, Arizona. That's how special Tucson is as an opportunity for the climate movement, in particular, our Get Out the Vote campaigns in the climate movement this year. All right, you don't need me to tell you that up and down the ballot, Arizona is razor tight right now. This is the latest presidential polling average taken from 538.com, and you can see how close it is. And you can see how close it has been for a month and a half. This is going to be an amazingly close election. And if 10,400 votes separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump 4 years ago, I'd be shocked if the difference this fall was much bigger than that. I know you don't want to hear that, but this is going to be super, super close. Okay, another really interesting bit of data. We at the Environmental Voter Project recently did a poll in battleground states of young voters. In Arizona, we saw by huge majorities among both likely voters and unlikely voters that they were in favor of establishing the right to an abortion. Remember, I told you there would be this ballot measure on their ballot. But here's the really interesting thing. When we isolated the unlikely voters, so the people who said that they weren't that likely to vote this fall, 31% of them said that after hearing there would be this ballot measure that they could vote on in November, they were now much more likely to show up and cast a ballot. And another 45% were somewhat more likely. That's a big actionable piece of data. This means that simply making young voters aware of the fact that there will be this ballot measure on November 5th makes many of them more likely to show up. All right, now let's get to Nevada. Nevada is another crucially important battleground state. We have identified over 108,000 of these low propensity environment first voters. Again, what does that number mean in the context of the Nevada electorate? Well, you see, only 33,000 votes separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump 4 years ago. This is another really, really tight competitive state. And up and down the ballot, there are a lot of really important elections. President, U.S. Senate, 3 out of the 4 congressional seats in Nevada, not to mention another state abortion ballot measure. All right, when we look at these 108,000 low propensity environmental voters, what do we notice? Well, similar to what I pointed out in Arizona, this is a disproportionately young population. You can see that. Also similar to what we saw in Arizona, they're disproportionately made up of people of color. And that is, again, being largely driven by Black voters and AAPI voters. The Native American community is much smaller in Nevada, and so we don't see as dramatic a gap there. And again, look at that Hispanic voter crosstab there. Although these low propensity environmental voters are slightly more likely to be Hispanic than the overall electorate, it's only slightly. It's only slightly. And that's a change from what we would have seen 2 or 4 years ago when Hispanic voters were significantly more likely to list climate as a top priority than people in the overall electorate. All right. Whereas Trump was trending a little bit ahead of Harris in the Arizona polling average, it's reversed in Nevada. Harris is very narrowly ahead of Trump. Now, all of these are such small margins that you really shouldn't read into them. The simple truth of the matter is that this is a toss-up election right now in both Arizona and Nevada. It's a toss-up. Or as Ben Wickler, the head of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, often likes to say, and I think it's a great line, these races are within the margin of effort. So not within the margin of error, but within the margin of effort, which means volunteers are going to make a difference. How many volunteers and how hard they work are going to determine who wins these races. All right, similar to what we did in Arizona, we also recently polled 18 to 34-year-olds in Nevada. And as we saw in Arizona, they overwhelmingly support codifying abortion protections and essentially codifying Roe versus Wade at the state level. Also similar to what we saw in Arizona, when you isolate unlikely voters in Nevada, 32% of them, 32% of young unlikely voters say they are now much more likely to vote simply after being told, after being made aware of the fact that this abortion ballot measure is going to be on their ballot. Again, that's a big, big opportunity. Final bit of information that I just want to share with you is also in this poll of young voters, we wanted to measure voters' awareness of the different ways in which they can cast a ballot. And one thing that really stood out to us was the data that you see on Nevada there, where 29% of already registered young voters in Nevada didn't know that their state had voting by mail. Now, you might look at this entire chart and not wonder why I'm choosing that line, because it's not terribly out of line from what we see in some other states. Well, here's why this really struck us. Every active registered voter in Nevada is going to get mailed a ballot. It's already coming to them. And so the fact that 29% of registered young voters in Nevada don't know if their state has voting by mail, yet they're about to get their ballot in the mail, ooh, that's a potential problem. This is a recipe for people throwing out their ballots because they have no idea that they're coming. And again, this is an actionable piece of information. It's going to be crucially important for us to let Nevada voters know, and especially young Nevada voters, that their ballots are coming, and they are coming soon. And so we're going to be doing a lot of what's called heads up messaging to make sure that they're aware of that. All right, that was your mini briefing on what we're seeing in Arizona and Nevada this fall. If you'd like more information, you can always go to environmentalvoter.org. We would love to share even more of our data with you. Thank you all so much, and have a great day.